We all remember that team that seemed unstoppable. Allegri's Juventus, with an iron defense made up of Barzagli, Cellini, and Bonucci, the timeless leadership of Buffon, a midfield with Pjanic and Matuidi, attack with players like Dybala, Higuain, and Mandzukic. Year after year, they dominated Italy and seemed to be getting closer to the European dream. But what happened? How did a team that won 9 consecutive Scudettos go on to struggle to enter European competitions? Was it the coach's fault? Was it the management's decisions? Or was the fall simply inevitable? Today we will analyze the decline of Juventus from 2017 to the present day. The 2016 to 2017 season was not just another one for Juventus. It was the high point of a cycle that had been growing for years. A mature team, tactically brilliant and hungry for European revenge. Max Allegri achieved something difficult. A balanced group with defined roles capable of changing systems depending on the opponent without losing solidity. One of the great secrets was his tactical versatility. Allegri alternated between a 3-5-2 and a 4-2-3-1 that surprised everyone. The team knew when to retreat, when to press, when to strike. It was pure chess in motion. In Italy, they were unrivaled. They won the Serie A with authority and won the Coppa Italia, reaffirming their local dominance. But the real objective, as everyone knew, was the Champions League. In Europe, Juventus was a feared team. From the group stage, the team showed its power. They shared a group with Sevilla, Lyon, and Dinamo Zagreb. It was not an easy group, but Juventus finished undefeated. They won 4 games, drew 2, and showed something that would be key throughout the tournament: an almost perfect defense. Only 2 goals conceded in 6 games. Buffon was beginning his path to the moral Ballon d'Or that so many believed he deserved. In the round of 16, the opponent was Porto. The first leg in Portugal was an example of maturity: 2-0 with goals from Piaca and Dani Alves. The second leg in Turin was a formality: another 1-0 and qualification without surprises. Juve advanced strong, compact, without fanfare but with authority. In the quarterfinals, against Barcelona with Messi, Suarez, and Neymar, Juve put in a memorable performance. In Turin, Dybala shone brightly, scoring 2 goals that will go down in history. Chiellini sealed the 3-0 win. At the Camp Nou, they knew how to suffer: total resistance. 0-0 draw, unbeaten goal, job done. In the semifinals, Mbappe's young and daring Monaco tried to spring a surprise, but experience and order prevailed. At the Louis II, Juve won 2-0. At home, they closed with a 2-1 win. The defense, once again, was decisive. Juve arrived in Cardiff with only 1 goal conceded in the entire competition. The final was set: Juventus versus Real Madrid. 2 giants, 2 styles, 2 obsessions with the Orejona. The first half was even. Cristiano scored, but Mandzukic responded with a masterpiece: a goal from another planet. An exquisite bicycle kick with the taste of an exploit. Juve seemed to be ready. The dream was within reach, but the second half was a reality check. Madrid pressed the accelerator and Juve found no answers. They blurred, they got tired, they fell. The final score was a painful 4-1. Another European final slipped away. Another blow to Buffon's heart. Another missed opportunity. That night in Cardiff was more than a defeat. It was the symbolic end of an era. The last great Juventus. After that, something broke. And although signings, stars, and promises arrived, the team never had that same soul again. After the blow in Cardiff, Juventus decided to keep its core. Buffon was still dreaming of a Champions League title. The BBC, although no longer as dominant, was still there. Dybala was the big young star. Allegri was still in charge. But something was different. The team no longer commanded the same respect. The defense was starting to lose its solidity. The midfield was aging, and the hunger, the one that took them to 2 finals in 3 years, felt a little more muted. In Serie A, Juventus were still superior, but Sarri's Napoli forced them to fight to the end. It was a tighter, more demanding league, where the Scudetto was defined in the last few rounds. Juventus became champions again, but it was no longer with authority but with resistance. In the Champions League, it was more turbulent. The group stage was irregular. They drew with Sporting, lost to Barca, They qualified second without much shine. In the round of 16, they faced Tottenham. The first leg in Turin left doubts. A 2-2 draw after leading 2-0. But in London, experience won the day. Higuain and Dybala, in a flurry, came from behind. It was a sign of the character that still remained. And then came the most symbolic match of all, the quarter-final against Real Madrid. In the first leg in Turin, Juventus were swept aside. Cristiano Ronaldo scored a brace, including a mythical bicycle kick, perhaps the most beautiful ever seen in the Champions League. Buffon could only watch. The entire stadium rose to its feet. Even the Juve fans applauded. 3-0. It seemed to be all over. But in the second leg, Juventus wrote one of their most intense nights. With goals from Mandzukic and Matuidi, they went 0-3 up at the Bernabeu. The feat was near. The excitement was at its peak. But in the 93rd minute, penalty for Madrid. Buffon explodes, is sent off. Cristiano scores, 4-3 on aggregate. Another cruel elimination. That was Buffon's last Champions League game with Juventus, the end of an era. Juventus had fought, but it was no longer enough. That summer, many things began to change. And without knowing it, that duel against Madrid would mark the beginning of a new chapter. In the summer of 2018, Juventus shakes up the soccer world with one of the most shocking transfers in history. Cristiano Ronaldo arrives in Turin. For over 100 million euros, the five-time Ballon d'Or winner lands in Italy with a single goal: to win the Champions League with Juventus. Cristiano's arrival not only raised the soccer level, but also marketing, prestige, and expectations. It was the most ambitious signing in the club's history. In Serie A, the dominance continued. Cristiano adapted quickly, although his first goal was slow in coming. He finished the season with 21 league goals, leading the team to a new Scudetto. It was his 8th in a row, but the real focus was in Europe. In the Champions League group stage, Juve shared a group with Manchester United, Valencia, and Young Boys. They won 4 games, lost 2, and qualified first. Then, in the round of 16, came one of the most memorable moments of this era. The opponent, Atletico de Madrid. At the Wanda Metropolitano, Juventus suffered a painful defeat. 2-0. Simeone celebrated with rage. The press began to bury the project, but in the second leg, Cristiano worked his magic. Hat-trick, 3 goals. A legendary performance. The stadium exploded. The comeback was complete. 3-2 on aggregate. Turin was living its dream night. At last it seemed that this time it was the year. However, in the quarterfinals, the cold water hit the fan. The opponent, a young and daring Ajax who had just eliminated Real Madrid. The first leg in Amsterdam was 1-1. Cristiano scored and seemed to take control. But in the second leg, Juventus were outplayed. Ajax won 2-1 in Turin, with vibrant, vertical, fearless soccer. Juve ran out of answers. Cristiano tried, but the team was not with him. It was a hard blow. The elimination made it clear that having Cristiano was no guarantee of success. The team lacked a competitive midfield, clear ideas, and a solid project behind the star. At the end of the season, Massimiliano Allegri was sacked. Despite having won 5 consecutive leagues, 4 cups, and having reached 2 European finals, the cycle was over. It was the end of a brilliant period in terms of domestic titles, but a failure in Europe. And Juventus was preparing for a new experiment. Sarri, the Saraball, and the search for identity. After Allegri's departure, Juventus opted for a complete change of style. Maurizio Sarri, the architect of Napoli's attacking style, arrived with the mission of modernizing the game. The idea was clear: more possession, more fluidity, more spectacle. The famous Sarri-ball. But right from the start, something didn't fit. The squad was built for something else. There was talent, but not the type of players required by Sarri's system. The midfield remained the big problem, and although Cristiano was still scoring goals, the team had no collective soul. Still, in Serie A, Juve won again. It was the 9th consecutive Scudetto, but this time with more suffering than glory. There was a lot of criticism. The soccer was slow, predictable, without identity. It looked like a team playing in a suit that didn't fit. In the Champions League, the group stage was relatively solid. Juventus finished first, ahead of Atletico Madrid. Bayer Leverkusen and Lokomotiv Moscow. But in the round of 16 came one of the toughest blows of the modern era. The opponent, Olympique Lyon. In the first leg, Juve lost 1-0 in France. In the second leg, with the pandemic already affecting the schedule, they played at an empty Allianz. Cristiano scored 2 goals, including a stunning strike from outside the box, but it was not enough. Lyon scored a penalty, and 2-1 was not enough. They were eliminated by the away goal Juventus, who had signed Cristiano to win the Champions League, were knocked out in the round of 16 against a lesser opponent. The disappointment was total. A few hours later, Maurizio Sarri was sacked. He lasted only 1 season, and the question began to sound louder and louder. Is Juventus building a team, or just trying not to break? The club, with no clear direction, decided to go for an unexpected surprise. Andrea Pirlo, with no coaching experience, would take over in the midst of a project that was starting to falter. After Sarri's dismissal, Juventus made a decision that surprised everyone. Andrea Pirlo, club idol, midfield legend, but with no coaching experience, was appointed new first-team DT. The goal was to refresh the project, recover identity, and connect with the Bianconeri essence. But the reality was different. Pirlo tried to implement a modern style of play with a backline, high pressing, and intelligent possession. However, the team never found consistency. Ideas were not coming together, the midfield remained uncontrolled, and the defense was no longer secure. In Serie A, for the first time in a decade, Juventus were not champions. Conte's Inter snatched the title with authority. Juve finished 4th, narrowly qualifying for the Champions League. Cristiano Ronaldo was once again the team's top scorer, with 29 league goals, but collective soccer was conspicuous by its absence. In the Champions League, Juventus experienced another big disappointment. The group stage was positive. They overcame Barcelona, Dynamo Kiev, and Ferencváros, qualifying first and leaving a great image with a 3-0 defeat at Camp Nou. But in the round of 16, the opponent was Porto, and there the frustration returned. The first leg in Portugal was a defensive disaster, 2-1 for Porto. In the second leg in Turin, Juve went on the attack in desperation. Cristiano did not score. Federico Chiesa was the team's best player, forcing extra time. But a goal from a free kick by Sergio Oliveira, with a poorly set barrier where Cristiano jumped and turned, was the fatal blow. Juve won 3-2 but were eliminated on away goals, another elimination in the round of 16, another season without Champions League, and now without the Italian League. The project was faltering, Pirlo was not convincing, Cristiano was getting tired, and rumors of a departure were beginning to swirl. Although Pirlo won the Supercoppa Italiana and the Coppa Italia, the balance was clear. He wasn't ready, and after just 1 season, he was also sacked. It was official. Juventus was in free fall, and Cristiano, seeing that the project was not moving forward, began to prepare his exit. After a frustrating season, Cristiano Ronaldo packed his bags. He returned to Manchester United. He left with more than 100 goals in 3 years, but with one certainty. He did not achieve what he came for, the Champions League. Juventus, on the other hand, was betting on nostalgia. Massimiliano Allegri was returning to the bench with the mission of recovering the lost stability. But the return was not like before. The team was different. Without Cristiano, without clear leaders, with a weak midfield, and a defense that was no longer intimidating. Juve was no longer feared, neither in Italy nor in Europe. In Serie A, the performance was inconsistent from the start. Many tactical doubts, few goals, and lackluster match wins. They finished 4th, far from the title, qualified for the Champions League, but far below the historical standard. In the Champions League, once again, the pattern repeated itself. The group stage was solid. They finished first, ahead of Chelsea. It seemed that the team responded on European nights. But in the round of 16, disaster struck. Juventus versus Villarreal. The first leg in Spain was 1-1. A good result. But in the second leg, in Turin, everything collapsed. In the last 15 minutes, Villarreal scored 3 goals. Yes, 3-0. Juventus, once again, humiliatingly eliminated in the round of 16. The feeling was clear. This team was no longer living up to the shield it represented. There was no plan. There was no hierarchy. And worst of all, there was no identity. While the rest of Europe was evolving, Juventus seemed to be lagging behind, caught between the nostalgia of the past and the confusion of the present. If the previous season had been disappointing, this one was straight up chaotic. Juventus 2022 to 2023 faced not only problems on the field, but a storm off it as well. The team started the season with renewed expectations. Signings like Di Maria, the return of Pogba, and Bremer seemed to breathe new life into the team. It was hoped that Allegri, now with more tools, would be able to get the project back on track. But very soon, everything fell apart. In the Champions League, Juventus put in their worst ever performance in the group stage. Sharing a group with PSG, Benfica, and Maccabi Haifa, Juve won only one match and lost 4. Yes, they even lost to Maccabi. They finished third and were sent to the Europa League, a huge blow for the club's history. In Serie A, performance was inconsistent. Some positive spurts, but followed by inexplicable drops. The team showed little soccer, a lot of individual dependence, and a defense that no longer guaranteed anything. But the worst came from the offices. In the middle of the season, the scandal exploded. Caso plusvalias. Juventus was accused of altering balance sheets to inflate the value of certain signings. As a result, it received a penalty of 15 points less in the league. And although they were later temporarily reinstated, the damage had already been done. The board, headed by Andrea Agnelli, resigned in full. An entire era collapsed. The club was not only losing on the field, it was also losing its values, its credibility, its structure. In the Europa League, there was a small illusion. Juve reached the semifinals, but they were eliminated by Sevilla, a tournament specialist. And in Serie A, no longer motivated, and with the sanction again active, they finished out of the European places. A sad end, a lost team, a giant club that no longer remembered how to be one. After the institutional storm, Juventus began the 2023 to 2024 season with a low profile. With no Champions League, sanctions in the air, and a damaged reputation, the discourse was no longer one of winning, but of rebuilding. Massimiliano Allegri was still in charge, but no longer as the architect of a winning project, but as the guardian of stability. His goal was simple: regain dignity, to compete, go back to basics. Without big signings and with less media pressure, Juve began to look inward. The youngsters from the youth academy became protagonists. Fagioli, intelligent, technical, with vision. Moretti, willing, dynamic, still growing. Yildiz, a Turkish gem who began to shine with flashes of pure talent. And Gatti, Ealing Jr., among others. In Serie A, Juventus showed a more solid side, especially in defense. They returned to winning games by 1-0 to compete with order, to fight at the top of the table. But the soccer was still conservative, not very showy, with many offensive doubts. The team survived but did not excite. The problem was clear: Juventus no longer makes a difference. And although there is talent, there is no clear model of play, nor a renewed identity. Moreover, off the field, the echoes of the past continued. Appeals, lawsuits, financial pressures, a climate that makes it difficult to look to the future with clarity. The Allegri project seemed to be running out of steam, and while clubs like Inter, Milan, and Napoli were evolving, Juventus were still caught between nostalgia for the past and fear of the future. The season was progressing with ups and downs. Good results, but without conviction. Champions League qualification as a goal, but without guarantees. And the question is inevitable: is Juventus being reborn, or is it simply delaying its definitive downfall? Juventus went into the 2024 to 2025 season with a backpack full of history, but an empty tank. After years of failures, sanctions, and changes of course, the club knew it could no longer live off the past. It was time to choose. rebuild itself, or disappear into the memories. The project began with Thiago Motta on the bench, a young, modern coach with clear ideas. But the pressure, the lack of connection with the dressing room, and two painful defeats, 0-3 versus Fiorentina and 0-4 versus Atalanta, left him out before he could settle. And then, on March 23rd, 2025, Igor Tudor took over. With character, intensity, and a direct style, Tudor brought aggressiveness back to the team. His 3-4-2-1 system prioritizes high pressing, quick recovery, and verticality. And, little by little, the team began to show signs of life. The squad also underwent a revolution. Important names left: Federico Chiesa to Liverpool, Kine, Ealing Jr., Soulé, and more. But the signings were well thought out with a real intention to rebuild the team. Teun Koopmeiners, driving force in the middle. Douglas Luiz and Kefren Thuram, muscle and technique. Nicolas Gonzalez and Francisco Conceição, young overflow. And Kenan Yildiz, the new 10, symbol of a new era. Compared to Del Piero, Yildiz represents the soul Juventus had lost. In Serie A, the fight is intense. Juventus is in 5th position, but the fight to get into Champions League is a point-to-point war. Every match is a final. Every victory, a breath of fresh air. And, for the first time in years, the team is once again competing with dignity. In Europe, it was a different story. Juventus participated in the Champions League, but was eliminated early in the playoffs. They also competed in the new Club World Cup, but failed to advance beyond the group stage. One more disappointment, which only reinforces the idea that the rebirth will not be immediate. In the Coppa Italia, they were eliminated in the quarterfinals by Empoli on penalties. In the Supercoppa Italiana, they lost in the semifinals, and yet the fans are starting to get their hopes up. Not because of the titles, but because there is finally a clear direction. At last, Juventus seems to be moving away from being a name and becoming a team again. The 2024 to 2025 season will not be remembered for trophies, but it can be remembered as the year the giant woke up,